grunt and sigh in agony because I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it's like when your
Oh yeah.
subconscious mind is completely plagued with sickness.
Oh yeah.
Could you just explain for the audience how much we are truly slaves to our subconscious programming?
Oh, absolutely. Well, think about this. Every single emotion you have, every single bit of dread you ever feel, um, that's all coming from your subconscious mind, right? Everything that is not a conscious, deliberate thought is run by your subconscious mind, which means that you're essentially it controls your reality, right? Every bit of input from the outside world, every bit of input from your internal world gets filtered through and processed by your subconscious mind before it ever gets presented to your conscious mind for action. So it literally controls your reality. I mean, if you can think back to like high school and stuff like that, whenever you weren't as good with girls, or I mean, not necessarily you, you've always kind of been that way, but like for a lot of guys, you look back at high school after learning game in their older years, looking back at high school at all those different women that they can now see all the indicators of interest and all the signs that they wanted to get together. It's like you just straight out didn't see it back then,
Yeah.
right? Because your unconscious mind was like, that's not for you. You don't get to have that. And so I'm just not going to show you that opportunity. And it can play with your head that way. It can have you worried about things that are not a concern, right? These guys who are plagued by every single anxiety and every single fear. And those are just different tools that your unconscious mind is using to influence your conscious decisions, right? Take approach anxiety.
Mm.
This is like a perfect example that everybody, all kinds of guys struggle with, right? They have this internal sense that, if they go up to this woman, they're going to get rejected, right? That it's a judgment on their value and somehow they're just going to come up short. Like they're just not going to measure up no matter what they do. So their unconscious mind slams them with all this anxiety and all this fear and gives them all these different excuses to keep them from going up and experiencing that pain of being rejected. Because they already believe that walking up there, they're going to be rejected because they don't measure up. They have a belief inside their unconscious mind that says they're not good enough, or they don't measure up, or nobody likes them, or women aren't going to like them, or whatever it happens to be. And because of that, their unconscious mind is like going up there is dangerous because you're going to get hurt. So they go ahead and make you anxious and afraid and mess with you and say, oh, she's out of your league, or oh, she's stuck up and it's just not worth it, and whatever it happens to be, to keep you from going up there and confirming to yourself what you already believe about yourself, right? And it does that every single day, constantly. It is
Mm.
constantly automatically judging the situations around you and trying to influence your conscious thoughts, influence your conscious actions based on what it believes is true in the back of your head.
And it's so crazy how like people are not even aware of how much this thing is in control of you because like I said, I
Yeah.
had in 2000 yeah, like 2020 we really got rid of it. But I just had like this eating impulse thing. And I wasn't like, I was never like morbidly obese, I was just like got a little fat.
Right.
But it was just like it was like this like just gnawing feeling. And it's so crazy now that it's gone to like
Oh, yeah.
hear that beautiful sound of silence, but like this gnawing feeling that like I just needed to eat this Snickers bar. I just needed to eat this Kit Kat. I just needed to eat this pizza. And then like rationalizing in my mind how I'll be able to like work off the calories and how I'll be able to,
Yep.
skip this meal and do this and do that. And it was just like, fucking hell, mate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had the hardest time with diet stuff too. I'm still kind of struggling with it more for physical reasons than the mental ones. But
Mhm.
up until this past year, like food has been my go-to comfort. Like, well, food, sex. Let's be
Mhm.
honest, food, sex have been my like go-to comforts in my life. And up until last year, it it was not a good time for me. It really wasn't. Even though I was successful, looking on the outside end, I was making six figures a year. I was dating a woman who was half my age, treated me really well. I had a couple other girls on the side. From the outside looking in, everything was great.
Mhm.
But internally, there was still a lot of stuff that I was really doing. It was some really heavy stuff. I've told you this in private. I mentioned in some of our, the Men's Empowerment Network seminars that like up until last summer, I really didn't want to be alive. It's
Yeah.
just like kind of existing, just kind of surviving, right? Just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah.
And if you're a highly capable guy, going through the motions and doing things that are relatively easy for you means six figures you're dating somebody half your age. But that's not living. It's not really going for what you want, right?
Mhm.
And when you're in that space and you're just trying to get by, you're doing whatever you need to just to kind of keep yourself happy enough to wake up another day. And so going for things like food, going for things like just immersing yourself in sex, drinking a lot, partying a lot, drugs, whatever it happens to be, just to get by, just to make life tolerable. I see that all the time. Almost everybody who comes to me for food related stuff or weight related stuff, it's some kind of tool that they were using just to make themselves feel good when life just wasn't worth it any other way.
Hmm.
You see that all the time, at least I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's like crazy too, because like when you go down this rabbit hole, for me now, I'll tell you what my perception is, and you tell me what you think.
Sure.
So, ever since I started really working on pulling all the trauma out of me,
Hmm.
getting rid of the bad subconscious belief systems, and a lot of this is rooted in toxicity. Am I wrong in that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from a different model perspective. Like, I don't necessarily look at it from a trauma model because,
mm-hmm.
like, not everybody's gone through the same kind of pain. Like, you've had a rough go of it, to
Yeah,
put
like
it mildly. You've been through some shit,
on a
right?
scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate me on the
Oh, you're
on?
a good solid 8+. Like,
Okay,
let's be honest,
yeah,
a good solid 8+. Like, people have had it worse, but not by many.
yeah, yeah.
And as guys, we tend to minimize the stuff we go through.
I
Like,
did that. I normalized. I was like, oh, I'm
and it's like, yeah,
overreacting. You know,
yeah,
just same
exactly.
happens to everybody.
Yeah. So if you're looking at stuff from a trauma model, like it's like, oh, you've been through all this stuff and you've had all this pain and that's why you're there. Well, a lot of guys aren't looking at their lives through that lens,
Hmm.
right? They're not looking at, I grew up pretty good household actually. Nobody was like beating me. Nobody's chucking PlayStations at me. None of that kind of stuff. Grew up, middle class white boy in the Midwest. My thing was just I was always different from everyone else. I mean, that was all it really took. Just being that different from everybody else and just having a hard time connecting that way was enough to mess me up for life.
Hmm.
And you wouldn't think about that as a trauma
Right.
per se. Nobody was beating me, nobody was hurting me, but just that constant reminder every single day that you are not like everyone else and it is harder for you than it is for everyone else for no reason that you can comprehend was enough to mess me up. you know
Yeah.
so for me, I look at it from a more of a behavioral standpoint of like everything you're doing has a purpose. And so if you have to fight yourself every day, there's a reason for that. If you're holding yourself back from getting the things you want, there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
And so if you start looking into like what the different behaviors you're doing are causing in your life, for example, like for us, we're talking about the eating. It's like, okay, great, we don't get to have the body we have, what we want. Why? Fair enough, right? Or, oh, my life is miserable, this is the only thing I'm doing that actually makes me feel good. That's probably the reason why you're eating so much and why you're eating junk food and everything else, is because you're doing it to keep, make life bearable when it's not.